So we're moving on to Europe in our course. We've been looking at antiquity, focusing primarily on Greece and Rome, and now we're going to move into Europe. For those of you who have been in my courses on the history of medieval Europe or World Civ 1, some of this may be a bit of a review for you, but we're trying to put it into the concept of the city and its development and its history in Europe. So let's do it. Before we hit Europe first, we need to look at one of the elements from the old Roman world that comes forward and has a tremendous influence on Europe, and that is Christianity. As you can see from this map, the areas that were first Christianized from the time of Christ, say at the beginning of the Common Era, up until the year 300, give or take, Christianity was focused mostly on the cities. You can see from this map that we have Antioch, Damascus, Jerusalem over here in what we would call the Middle East, and then certainly Alexandria, Memphis in Egypt. Moving up to Greece, Constantinople, that city named for the Emperor Constantine, the first emperor of Rome to profess Christianity, Athens, etc. So we have all of these regions here that are mostly associated with cities. Again, reminding you that our topic for this class relates to cities, culture, entertainments, etc., and the arts. Christianity, a new philosophy, a philosophy in the Mediterranean, first completely misunderstood by the Romans and then persecuted, made illegal by the Romans. The punishment for practicing the faith was indeed death. This new religion, at first, terrible stumbling blocks in the Roman world, but over time, and it will take some time, Rome will embrace this new faith, embrace this new philosophy. It was St. Paul who said, let's go to the cities. The cities will find a much better venue for us to bring this new religion. There are public spaces where one can do public speaking. There are more people living in the city, say, than in the countryside. So you have greater population density. Paul knew that the way to spread this religion as fast as he possibly could was to hit the cities first. And as you can see from this map, by the year 300, the major cities of the Roman Empire, from Cordoba in Spain to Damascus in Syria to Constantinople here in what is modern-day Turkey, to Athens, even Rome, moving up to Milan and Paris, all of these places found a great growth place for Christianity. The reason this map suggests taking a look at round about 300 is that we get the first Christian emperor in Constantine. The Emperor Constantine comes around in the early 300s, and by 312 he has made Christianity legal. That allows for a faster spread of the religion. That allows for an actual development of the church to develop and be unhindered. So we get lots of new developments in the history of Rome, with Christianity being embraced by a Roman emperor. And as time goes on, wherever the Roman Empire went, Christianity followed. This is an image of early Christian art. It comes from the catacombs. This is a burial space outside the city of Rome. You've been looking at the story of Antigone, and so you know that burial of people in a particular city-state is a very important issue. Typically, we buried our dead outside the city for lots of reasons, some of them religious, some of them associated with public health, but in the Christian world, we had to be even more secretive about our burials because Christianity for the longest time was illegal. And so one of the great archaeological digs going on just outside the ancient city of Rome, though just mostly inside the modern day boundary still, are the catacombs of Rome. So you get these underground burial spaces where you can do tours today. This is a medieval image, and it's an image from a manuscript coming out of Europe, but a medieval image of Christianity versus Rome and the arena. This is an image of Ignatius of Antioch, but the art style, I hope you can notice, is indeed medieval. You see the arena depicted here with this curved line, but you see the French fleur-de-lis here. So that's a more modern, if you will, image. You also get these great towers here that are very much reminiscent of medieval fortifications. And you have Romans, typical, at least what the Europeans thought Romans would look like, acting as members of the audience here, and they're sticking their heads out of these towers, which, again, you know what the arena looks like, you know what the Colosseum is. It would not necessarily look much like this, but this was the medieval mind's imagination of what the terrible troubles for Christians would have been as they were thrown to the lions, as Ignatius of Antioch certainly was. I wanted to bring in this image of Constantinople. This map is a nice map. As you can see, it's part of a book that's been laid open, but it shows you a nice rendition of medieval Constantinople. I bring this forward because while Rome as a city will fall and sort of stop being Rome in a way, the city of Constantinople will continue. So while Rome as an ancient city will sort of cease to function, and we think of Europe, once Rome falls, we think of Europe as moving into a dark age because the Romans are not there. In Constantinople, that dark age never happens. Constantine moved the headquarters, the capital of Rome, from the west in Italy to the east, here in Constantinople. Originally, the city was named Byzantium. Byzantium by the Greeks. It was a Greek city. And when Constantine came and made this thriving city his city, he changed the name. Not a shy fellow. So we have that. It is today, of course, Istanbul. Istanbul is the Arabic transliteration, really, of the Greek. Greek for Ista, this, polis, city, Istapolis. So Istapolis, if you don't have a P sound in your language, often becomes a B sound. So Istapolis becomes Istanbul, Istanbul. This is a modern day image of Istanbul, or ancient Constantinople. You have some lovely red double-decker tourist buses here, but what you should be noticing, as befits the themes of this class, is we have this amazing public space here. What you may not be aware of is that this public space here was once a hippodrome, what the Romans would call a circus maximus, or a circus, and the Greeks would call a hippodrome, which was just a course for horses to run, so a racetrack, if you will. So that's left over from the old Greek Byzantium. This here, this tall feature, is an obelisk brought from Egypt. There's another one right here. An ancient Roman general who had gone down to Egypt and made some success down there wanted to bring back some souvenirs. And so for him, souvenirs were obelisks, and he literally picked them up and brought them back here to the great city of Constantinople to show his victory, and had them put up in the old hippodrome. You also have here in the background the great Christian church, as it once was. It is now a mosque, but it was created as a church by the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century AD. This is Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia in Greek means holy wisdom. Now, of course, because the city is now a center for Muslim, for Turkish scholarship and spirituality, this church has been turned into a mosque. So it is a mosque in Islamic tradition. And you also have added these great towers. If you see them here, there are five minarets. They are called, one for each of the 5 pillars of Islam. So in this one picture, you get an extraordinary combination of city identity. The Greek hippodrome, now made into a park. The Egyptian obelisks, indicating the extent of the Roman Empire, going down to Egypt and bringing some of Egypt back. The great Christian church of the Emperor Justinian. And then, of course, signaling the takeover of the city by the Turks and by a group that practices Islam, the minarets, indicating that this is now a mosque. So the identity of this city, the Greek Byzantium, the Roman Constantinople, and now Turkey's Istanbul. This is a footprint, a diagram of the city. We will look at a couple of diagrams in this slide presentation, but here you have the old hippodrome. If you remember that park, right? Here you have Hagia Sophia, the great church. And not to forget, we do have great defensive walls here right along the water. Here's a lighthouse tower so that people could look out and see what might be coming. Again, Constantinople, placed as it is, right at that intersection of Europe and Asia, sits on a very strategically important place. So constant awareness of who might be coming by sea or by land was important for these people. Just another modern image reminding us that modern Turks, modern people of Turkey living in Constantinople, now Istanbul, enjoy water features as much as the ancient Romans did. And the interior of this great church. We will be looking at Gothic cathedrals. It is 6th century Roman building here at the center of this great church, this great city, that reminds us that these Romans could create these amazing domes, terrific arches. And when this church became a mosque, it was retooled, if you will, redecorated to some extent. There are still some of the old mosaics here, which is great, but it has been turned into a mosque with the decoration. So we're going to move over to Europe. We're going to go west from Constantinople and see a town perhaps not quite as grand as Constantinople or Istanbul. And this is the town of Barnsley in England. And the reason I have this for you is if you decide you want to look more into city centers or the kind, and you may have to get into the kind of archaeology that can be done and has been done to try to determine where a city center was, especially in a city that's been built over as the years go by. We'll have in our readings in our last couple of weeks a very modern attempt to look at city planning. And not only what does a community need in the 21st century, but what does a community need not only with regard to public space, but also with regard to virtual space. Right? So there's some interesting arguments going on. So it may be that the town center is something you're interested in. This particular town center in Barnsley is, as you can see, located, the pink area is the original city center. It's located very much where roads crossed, and most likely most small towns in medieval Europe were located where old Roman roads crossed because people traveled those roads, and those were potential dwellers who might want to come and stay in your town, tradespeople, or maybe people who needed some of the resources or services you would offer. This is a little easier to see the layout of a town. This is Carcassonne, I'm going to mispronounce that, sorry, from France, an old walled medieval city. You can find many of these around Europe today, in Italy, in France, in Germany. These people are worried about defense. Defense is one of our main issues in this class, looking at the origins of cities and why people gather together as a community. And as you can see, you've got defensive walls here with towers. You've got an area where defenders could gather should they need to, and then another wall beyond that with more towers. Here is the gate, the old gate for the city, where you would come in, but still you would be surrounded by defenders once you got in. So again, very concerned these folks are for defense. You have the religious center here, a church, as part of the community, and then lots of dwellings, as you can see, dwellings and perhaps businesses. So a terrifically preserved medieval city, still very vibrant today as we move into the 21st century. This is Peter Bruegel's 16th century imaginative display of maybe something he saw right out his own window. It's called Children's Games, and I like it for a lot of reasons, but it's a very interesting image. There's a lot of busyness going on and lots of people enjoying their town center, not only here in the foreground, but all the way up the road and all the way over here to the river. So we'll come back to this image, but the medieval town is where we're headed. This image from a manuscript gives you some idea of medieval commerce. So small towns, very busy, starting out very small as economic centers. Over to your left, you have gentlemen here preparing cloth, preparing textiles. You see some either cleaning them, repairing them, or maybe even fabricating them. You have, back here, perhaps luxury goods. These appear to be ermines, that black and white fur that you often see associated with royalty. This fellow is getting a shave and a haircut, it appears. So you can get personal services. And then this fellow over here to your far right with the jars, these bowls full of interesting things. And then over here you have a rhinoceros tusk, if you can imagine, that they had access to. This fellow is an apothecary. I know a lot of you are nursing majors or healthcare majors. And here is your ancestral profession, if you will, an apothecary, preparing remedies for folks. So many things can be had at the medieval town. Just to remind you of the economic importance of town, this is a Northern European map of the various towns that start to be developed as we move into the 1100s, 1200s, and we see lots of small towns and lots of small towns starting to develop, and we think that there was a pretty regularly traveled trade routes in this time. So towns growing economically as we move closer to our own time in history. Monumental building. We talked about monumental building as one of the key features of any society. You've looked at the theater and the Parthenon in Athens. You've looked at the Colosseum, maybe the Pantheon in Rome. Now we're moving on to the Gothic Cathedral. As we said before, Christianity developing in the ancient world, developing as an important philosophy, as an important faith, and there was a concerted effort made by the Roman Church to push that religion further north, to evangelize in some very dangerous times in medieval Europe toward some extraordinary success. When we get to the High Middle Ages, this time period from 1000 to about 1300 AD, we start to see Christianity growing confident. Confident in the future of Europe, confident in the future of the church and the religion itself, and a lot of that confidence is put into great monumental building. This is Chartres in France. Some of you know your architecture, your history of art, and perhaps you see the great spire here at Chartres. Many different cities would vie to see which city could have the tallest spire. These spires could be seen from miles away. You might not know exactly which direction you're headed into, but you know you're going to Chartres, and you keep looking on the horizon for that spire so that you know that you're getting closer. These are bell towers here. And some of you probably know this architectural feature. These buildings were heavy because they're made of stone, and they're also very tall. The interiors we'll take a look at in a minute, very open, very large, so lots of stress on the sides of the building. So the Europeans developed an architectural engineering feature known as the flying buttress. This buttress here not only holds up the building, but throws some of the stress down to the ground, away from the building, so that you don't get collapses, which could happen if they weren't properly prepared, properly engineered. This is Notre Dame in Paris. Again, right here on the River Seine. And as we've said before, just tremendous ability, resources, confidence in building these great structures. Here you have the stained glass, also a feature of medieval cathedrals. It was a new thing. People were just amazed by this beautiful effects, if you will, that the light could offer once you were inside. These beautiful colors. This rose window here, the crowning achievement of the artist who put together these great stained glass windows and to create the light inside these large buildings. Remember, no electricity. No electricity. You've got to have windows letting in light, and you also have to remember that the buildings are made of a lot of stone, so you don't have a lot of windows. Glass is a rare thing indeed. You can see, I think, a little bit of the natural sunlight shining here, all the way down, right? So no electric lights here, you can see, right? not at least in this particular area, but lots of natural light coming in from clear windows. This image is also nice for showing the great height that the church architects could achieve. Again, the symbolism here certainly is not lost, that this great height helped to sort of reinforce the greatness of God, the greatness of Christianity. Stained glass windows, we said before, very important. This is from Cambridge in England. And you can only imagine what the inside of the church would be like on a sunny day when the light shines through these beautiful images. Of course, and with an illiterate community, most people in Europe don't read, can't write, and this is a religion of the word, and we need to learn our lessons about Christianity. We need to try to figure out a way to apply them to our lives. So images in stained glass would help to tell the story of the life and times of Christ. For example, we have here the image of Christ washing the feet, right? So lots of lessons to be learned, to be taught through these beautiful stained glass. Again, a great work of art, but also an important element of serving the community in the church. So moving on back to our city, we talked about monumental building, we've talked about religion. One of the other elements we've been discussing about city living and city history in general has been the whole idea of order, law and order in a city. Law and order for a community. Again, getting back to your Antigone and this idea that poor Creon is trying to decide which way shall he go? What's the best way to maintain order? What's the best way to maintain justice in our city? As you know, he came across some difficulties there. He was confused at times as to what justice was about. The same thing might be said for our Romans and the gladiator games, that the arena allowed for the state to impose some kind of fear, if you will, in its authority, some kind of aspect of that. We are the state, we have the power over life and death, pay attention. So the same thing might be said of some of these images that we will see in the medieval city. This particular image, again from a manuscript, shows a public execution. Now we don't know who this fellow is, we don't know what his crime was, but as you can see, he is there kneeling on this platform. The executioner here with a sword. There are people who seem to be religious officials associated with helping this fellow either give his last confession or somehow blessing him into the afterlife, if that's at all possible for him. And then you see all around, from the windows up here, from this balcony up here, and then of course down on the ground, that we see people all around sort of watching this and trying to figure and being a part of it as a community. So violence was on display in medieval cities for sure. Life was hard, and just as the Romans did, we are going to have public executions to try to reinforce our ideas about right and wrong. Other uses for public space, maybe not just executions. As we're moving forward, I wanted to give you some examples of, back in Italy, we're looking at some great examples of open space. Some of these spaces were ancient, to be sure. Some of them developed in the Middle Ages, but they certainly are there for us all to enjoy in our own time in the modern era. This is the Capitoline Hill and a great public space there. Here we have a drawing, early modern drawings, moving into the 1700s. This is the Piazza Navona, a very ancient piazza, a very old public space, but also a very modern one as well. Here's your image today, again reminding you of the Roman connection to great fountains and great art and statuary. And it's the Piazza Navona that is a wonderful place to visit, either in the daytime or the nighttime. There's always something going on with vendors, with street performers, music, entertainment, and of course food. And hopefully you're recognizing some of the architectural features we have already seen in other places. You have this wonderful round sort of hippodrome or circus area that's the public area now, but you can absolutely see how that might have been in the past, and certainly was used for horse races, and then a domed church. Going off to England and some of our other elements, we talked about festivals in Greece, where some of you talked about some of the festivals you've been to and some of the parades you've been to, and that was really enjoyable to see all of the different elements in your own hometowns or in your counties that you're familiar with, whether they be in Asia, Latin America, or just up the road in Nebraska. It's been very interesting to see. Oh, sorry, I can't leave out Seattle, Washington. Very interesting to see what people have experienced throughout this country and around the world. This is an example of, this is now a more modern, cartoonish example of Elizabeth I when she was crowned. Again, she's contemporary with Shakespeare, where we're headed, and when she was crowned, there was a great procession planned throughout the city of London. Why have this? It's a new queen. We want people to know she's coming. We want people to know she's in charge, but we also want the people to enjoy and celebrate this new reign. We want them to feel part of it. There was a lot of planning that went into this. And just as some of you complained a little bit about the Wichita River Festival and some of its lack of grandeur, the planners for Elizabeth I and her coronation wanted to make sure they had everything down and that people would be very impressed. So you have a drawing of here and a plan out that says the Queen Majesty in her litter, which is just this thing that's being carried, right? Under the canopy, here's her canopy, borne by, and they don't have the finish there, but you're supposed to go up here, and here are the footmen. I want to say that says near about Her Highness's litter, and they're bearing it, right? Or is this bareheaded? They're all bareheaded. There you go. So these guys won't have anything on their heads. I think that's what that says, barehead, yeah. So this is, again, a plan to say this is how things will process. Here's Lord Giles is here, Lord Ambrose will be here, Lord Robert Dudley will be here, and so they've even got lined out the order of the people processing. Again, something we saw in regard to the very detailed plans for some of the processions in Greece. And it does look pretty impressive. A contemporary artist giving a rendering of this great procession. And this is Queen Elizabeth II. You may know she just recently celebrated, I believe, her 88th birthday to a great procession and parade and celebration in London. So we've been looking at monumental building, we've been looking at public squares, we've been looking at great state processions. We've been looking at trying to think about the identity of Constantinople, and now moving into Europe and thinking about, say, the Gothic cathedral as providing some sort of identity as monumental building for a town, a medieval town. Some of the other kinds of entertainment, some of the other arts that we find represented in these medieval towns are interesting to note. For example, the dance macabre. You may have seen this before, but we see images of this in many churches, in many places, in many towns, and we also have primary sources. We have people writing about these things. The 14th century in Europe was a terrible time. There was famine, there was warfare, and yes, the Black Plague, the terrible bubonic plague came through Europe, and the combination of these three things, some suggest, wiped out 1/2 of Europe's population. So a terrible time to live. A great time to survive, to be honest, but it'd be a terrible time to live through if you could make it. Some of the art starts to reflect this idea of dance. And not only just dance, but dance macabre. This young lady is dancing with this skeleton, who then is connected to this fellow here who is a king, right? So you get kings dancing with the dead, ladies who appear to be very lofty ladies. She has a crown on her head. Maybe she's the queen, dancing with death, to indicate that even the highest among us can suffer during this time of plague and famine and war. This other image from a German church is perhaps a little more primitive looking, if you will, right? But you get the same thing happening. You get someone here in nice robes, perhaps a churchman, dancing with someone who is a skeleton here. You get another person in some clothing, perhaps a knight, dancing with someone here that has a sword. This person has a much shorter tunic and is perhaps, lower class, we're not sure, dancing with another skeleton here. The idea seems to have been to put these images into the church to remind people that yes, life is hard. Yes, we're always, we have life. Death is a part of life. We're all of us on our way to death, or in some fashion. So accept that. Be okay with that, because the kingdom of Christ is coming. We will overcome the troubles of life in our faith, right? So it's sort of this idea that this is frightening to us, so let's go ahead and put the image up so that we can own that fear and transform it somehow through our faith, if that makes sense. So this idea of the dance being represented in art, and this dance macabre, this idea of addressing our fears through this dance and supporting that fear, overcoming that fear through faith, thereby putting it also associated with the church, is a very interesting use of art, dance, and music. We also have this lovely drawing from St. Mary's Church in Beverly, in England, and these are minstrels, indicating that music is a part of our lives. Music is a part of our lives, just as the church is. And so we have these wonderful musicians, very pretty, very nice picture, representing, everything from woodwinds to stringed instruments to the drum. Other kinds of entertainments we want to talk about. So if dancing and music are part of our lives and part of death, we also have other kinds of games, entertainments. This one from England is on the Thames, the River Thames that goes right through the heart of London, and these fellows are tilting. The aim seems to be that you get yourself in a boat, you get your oarsmen rowing, you've got your lance as though you were on the back of a horse jousting, and you are going to go down the river as fast as you can. Someone's down here either calling the time or providing some musical accompaniment, and this is your target. You're supposed to hit the target with your lance along the river. Right? So very difficult to do, very dangerous. There are other elements of this where two boats would sort of joust one another. And so you get the rowers going really fast, and you're trying to unseat someone who looks just like you in the opposing boat. Medieval mob football, I call it. We have stories of whole towns in Europe going at each other through football. Now this is football, perhaps closer to soccer than our modern football, though I don't know that there really aren't any rules here. So it's basically called football, as we said before, because you move the ball. The game proceeds by your foot. So you're moving the ball along with your foot as opposed to a stick or a bat or something of that sort. We have stories of whole towns coming out playing football against each other. This is not a team of 5 or 7 or 10 or 12. This is a team of one town versus the other. It could get muddy. It could get dangerous. People got trampled. So football, a very popular sport in medieval Europe. Oh, you can see this fellow up here as a spectator having a great time. People over here as well throwing their hats up, and this fellow just got a good kickoff evidently, and all these guys are hoping to get close. We have also a early London discussion. Your Shakespeare comes into London in the late 1500s. This fellow is 12th century. This is 1100s, before the plague. Well before Shakespeare, and he talks about how football was a great pastime in London. And I'm just going to read it for you if you don't mind. He says, after lunch, all the youth of the city go out into the fields to take part in a ball game. So this is, you've worked all morning, probably from early morning. You've had a nice meal, and now you're going to go work off a little bit of that meal, and you're going to go out into the field outside of town. The students of each school have their own ball. The workers from each city craft are also carrying theirs. So the blacksmith, the thatcher, the tailor, and then kids coming from schools, we're told. Older citizens, fathers, wealthy citizens came out on horseback to watch their juniors competing and to relive their own youth vicariously. You can see their inner passions aroused as they watch the action and get caught up in the fun being had by the carefree adolescents. So even as early as the 11th century, we have London football. We might call it intramural football today, but that's what seems to be going on. And again, a great pastime bringing all walks of life together, all ages. I should tell you, football was banned at one point in both France and England as way too dangerous because it was also a source of gambling. So as early as the 1300s, it was banned, but it came eventually to be accepted once it was embraced by kings, and kings enjoyed the sport as much as anybody else. I'm reminded that World Cup is going on as you're taking this class, and so I know we have a lot of competition for this kind of class, but the origins of World Cup certainly can be found here. Other kind of sports. If you're taking a look at Greenblatt on Shakespeare, and I hope you're doing that, you'll see that there are other kinds of sports that we might consider to be cruel. I hope we consider them to be cruel, in particular bear baiting. And as this image shows you, and as some of the film clips you've been looking at for Shakespeare show you, this was a very popular sport, if we can call it a sport, a very popular pastime and a very cruel sport, in that they would capture bears in the woods. Here in England, they would hamper those bears, as you can see here, with chains or with some kind of muzzle, and then set dogs on them. I'm sure the dogs didn't enjoy this much either. So, and people would take bets on them. They were hoping to see the bear suffer, to be killed. The Greenblatt article suggests that one of the reasons people enjoyed this kind of cruel sport is that somehow their lives were hard and cruel, and they could take out their aggressions on something lower than they, namely this poor bear. I'll leave you to decide on that one. A more, can we call it higher class kind of competition is the jousting. This is a modern image, of course, from a modern day Renaissance fair. Someone mentioned that in their postings. Thank you very much. So a modern day image of jousting, typically meant to be an aristocratic pursuit, as lords who were not currently at war tried to keep up their fighting skills. They drew large crowds, so this was indeed a spectator sport. Oh, a modern cartoon image of it, reminding us that the allure of the medieval joust is still with us today. Other pastimes that we might consider more elite than lower class would be hunting. This is falconry, and I believe this is Conrad of Germany. This is a nice tapestry of him. If I've got the art form correct, I believe that's a tapestry. It could be a manuscript, but it looks more tapestry to me. And you can see his dogs, you see his horse, and his trained falcon going after a bird. So hunting. And then a little bit lower class, can I say lower class? A little bit of a sport that more people could enjoy. Is it baseball? Is it cricket? It's a bat, it's a ball. It looks like the fellow on your right is pitching, and the fellow on the left is getting ready to hit that ball as it comes at him. So many different pastimes taking place in European cities, in the European countryside, adjacent to the cities, and in, of course, the town square. Getting back to Bruegel. So what we've been looking at in this slide is, or the slide presentation, is the rise of medieval cities in Europe. They have a lot of things in common with ancient cities, Greece and Rome. They have some new developments in the Gothic cathedral. These will be Christian societies, first and foremost. They're European. The climate's colder. You don't see as many outdoor squares. You don't see as much public business being done out of doors. But still, in this Bruegel painting, coming up about the time of Shakespeare, you're reminded that cities can be crowded, cities can be a little hectic, a little chaotic, maybe even a little dangerous, but people also gather there to have fun, to trade, to meet one another, to enjoy themselves. And I would invite you to take a minute or two to just look at this image and see how many different activities you can see people engaged in.